The heat on your face is not from shame, it is from the flames. They rise just beyond the marble balcony, licking the sky like tongues of judgment. You're not in the crowd, you are above them, crowned, silken, still. The people cheer as the fire consumes the girl bound to the stake. She is your sister. The crowd believes she is wicked. You know she is only in love. The king sits beside you, his fingers sticky with fruit, his eyes locked on the inferno as if watching a festival. He leans close and whispers, "This will make the court behave." You nod. You are 17. You have learned when to smile and when to stay silent. You do not flinch when the screams begin. But something inside you does. Something you had buried the day they found her with him. The stable boy with the dirt-caked nails and the unshakable smile. You said nothing then, you say nothing now, but your hand tightens on the carved wooden armrest of your throne until splinters pierce your skin. You do not bleed, you're not allowed to. You are a queen, and queens do not cry, not even when their sisters are turned to ash under a sky that once held both your names in whispered prayers. You tell yourself this is justice, but justice should not smell like burning hair. They say power cost everything. They never say who pays first. You were born beneath chandeliers, wrapped in embroidered linens, kissed by priests who whispered blessings in dead languages. They named you Seraphine, after the burning angels who guard heaven's gates. She came 2 winters later, smaller, softer, with eyes like dew and a laugh that arrived before her breath. They named her Alara, meaning light after storm, and for a time the kingdom had 2 sons. No one expected you to love each other, but you did. She would follow you barefoot into the palace gardens, her hem always muddied, her hair always tangled with petals. You learned how to curtsy, she learned how to climb trees. You learned how to lie, she learned how to sing. You were the air, she was the echo. And yet, in those quiet hours after lessons, when your heads touched beneath the same quilt, she was your only truth. Your mother said, "One of you must rule, the other must vanish." You never understood what she meant, until the morning Alara bled onto the stone steps and was forbidden from sitting beside you at court. Womanhood made you valuable. It made her distracting. You were stitched tighter into silks. She was sent to the northern cloisters to cultivate grace. You wrote letters. She sent back pressed flowers and drawings. Bad ones, crooked and sweet. One sketch had 2 figures holding hands before a gate made of stars. "For when the palace forgets us," she wrote, "it did not take long for the forgetting to begin." The servants stopped bowing when she entered. The maids called her the other one. The king referred to her only when displeased. She's too wild. She's too soft. She loves too easily. That last word, love, became a crime before you even understood its sentence. You first saw him brushing down one of the white mares in the courtyard. The stable boy. Calloused hands, olive skin, a scar across his jaw like a comma left in the wrong place. You thought nothing of it, until the day you caught them, hidden between the columns, her fingers tracing his throat, his mouth on her neck like he was drinking sunlight. Your breath caught. Not from shock, from recognition. You had wanted something like that once, but queens are not allowed to want. That night you said nothing. Not even when your mother asked why your hands were shaking at supper. Not even when you saw Alara's smile stretched wider than the horizon. It was a month later when the rumours reached the king. A servant had seen a dress abandoned in the stables. A guard found a ring. Alara's. The accusations came like thunder. Fornication, seduction, treason. You knew what he would do. The king did not make exceptions. Love was not a pardon. It was proof of guilt. You could have spoken. But your silence had already learned how to kneel, and her fate had already started gathering wood. The court chamber smelled like iron and orchids. The petals were meant to calm the nobles. The iron was for the shackles. Alara stood in the centre of the hall, barefoot, hands bound with ceremonial silk. The king sat high on the gilded dais, flanked by advisers who fed him words like venom through smiles. You were seated beside him, still, polished, dressed in violet to match the throne. She did not look at you, not once. The accusations were read aloud by the high cleric. Unlawful union with a servant of low birth, desecration of royal blood, intent to flee the kingdom with said servant. Each word landed like a fist. but it was the crowd's silence that hurt the most. These were people who once begged for Alara's laughter at feasts, who toasted her grace, who danced when she sang. Now they watched her like a lesson. The stable boy was not brought to the trial. He had already been handled, stripped of his name, then of his tongue, then of his life. Quietly, efficiently. A warning with no headline. The king preferred his punishments to echo through whispers, not declarations. Alara only spoke once. When asked if she denied the charges, she raised her chin and said, "I deny nothing except the shame you force upon love." Gasps followed. Someone wept. You blinked, but your hands gripped the throne so tightly your knuckles turned white. She still did not look at you. The sentence was swift. There would be no exile, no cloistered penance. Her fire would be public, staged before the great cathedral, under the very tower where you both used to hide when thunderstorms came. You tried to speak to the king that night, voice trembling. "She is your daughter." "She was my shame," he replied. "She is my sister." "She was your weakness." You said nothing after that. The night before the execution, you crept down the west corridor where the prisoners were kept before their final rites. The guard recognized you, hesitated, then turned his eyes to the floor. Alara sat against the wall, knees pulled to her chest, her hair wild again like when you were girls. She did not cry, she did not scream. When she looked up, she smiled. "So this is where stories end," she whispered. You sank to your knees beside her, but the words would not come. "I'm not afraid," she said. "Only sad I won't see how your story ends." You pressed your forehead to hers. She hummed a melody. It was the same tune she had sung during your night terrors as children, the one about the girl who outran the storm. You felt your throat close, but the tears never came. You'd forgotten how to cry. When the guards came, she stood without help. You did not move. You watched her disappear down the corridor like a candle fading behind glass. The next morning, the flames waited. They dressed you in gold, not white, not black. Gold. A colour of rain. A colour that reflects the sun and blinds the eye. The people needed to see you not as a grieving sister, but as a sovereign whose gaze did not waver, even when the world cracked in half. The execution square was packed beyond measure. Children hoisted on shoulders. Nobles beneath embroidered umbrellas. Peasants pressed like reeds against the walls. But all eyes pointed to one place, the raised stone platform crowned by a wooden stake, and Alara already tied to it, her gown soaked at the hem with oil. She stood taller than any sovereign had ever managed. When she caught your eye, because this time she did, you felt something ancient and unspeakable tear loose inside you. She did not plead. She did not scream. Her mouth moved to form your name, not your title. Your name! And for one unbearable moment you almost broke. But the king stood beside you, a single hand resting on your shoulder. That hand was light in weight and heavy in command. You stayed silent. The priest raised the flame. It caught fast, first at her feet, then up her legs, her sleeves, her hair. People gasped, some cheered, one woman fainted, but you did not move. The crown on your head felt heavier with every breath. The gold thread in your gown itched like fire ants under your skin. When her scream finally came, it was not the sound that gutted you, it was the tone. It was not pain, it was betrayal. The sound someone makes when their last tether to the world is severed. She had trusted you, and you had watched her burn. When it ended, the crowd scattered like startled birds. The king praised the swiftness of justice. The clergy declared the land cleansed. The guards threw sand over the smouldering bones. No one mentioned her name. Not at dinner, not at court, not in the morning dispatches. It was as if the flames had swallowed even the memory of her. But you remembered. In the halls you once roamed together. In the scent of lavender smoke that lingered too long in your hair. In the dreams where she called out again and again only to vanish behind fire. That night you sat alone in your chamber, hair unpinned, dress discarded. You stared at the mirror above your wash basin for hours, and for the first time you saw it. Your reflection flinched when you did not, as if it had a conscience and you did not. You picked up the edge of your robe and lit it with the candle. watched the flame crawl a few inches before snuffing it out with your bare hand. It blistered. You did not scream. This was your penance, not the fire itself, but the memory of how it sounded, how it smelled, how it changed nothing. You remained queen. The throne remained untouched, and your silence had become your name. You did not cry, not after the ashes were swept away, not after the king toasted peace restored, not even when a court painter offered to create a portrait of the royal daughters with one figure subtly omitted. You simply smiled, nodded, and ordered roses planted over the execution square. Red ones. "For beauty," you said. No one questioned the symbolism. They were too busy praising your poise. This was how queens survived, not by force, but by performance. You learned to speak in measured tones, to bow your head just low enough to humble, never enough to submit. You hosted feasts, you visited orphanages, you sang with the court choir until nobles wept over your piety. Every movement rehearsed, every smile sculpted. The people adored you. The kingdom forgot. You never did. But you understood the game. Grief, you discovered, could be disguised as grace. You read every dispatch from the provinces. Personally, you learned the names of guards, gardeners, cooks. You rebuilt the castle's lower chambers, added classrooms, music halls, prayer spaces. All for show, they said. And yet, there were fewer punishments, fewer public shames, fewer flames. Still, the king watched. He noticed how you never married. He noticed how you always wore violet, the colour of bruises and loyalty. He noticed the mirror in your chamber was turned to face the wall, but he said nothing, until the anniversary. They held a festival, of all things. 10 years since the purging of royal sin. There were lanterns, jesters, fireworks. You stood beside the king on the same balcony where you had once watched your sister vanish into light. Below, a puppet show mimicked the tale. Alara was portrayed as a wild seductress, the stable boy as a bewitched fool, the queen, you, was a radiant saviour, restored to righteousness. The crowd laughed. You did not. You turned, stepped off the dais, and walked into the garden, alone. There by the roses you found a girl, barefoot, servant's tunic, eyes wide, posture frozen. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know you would be here." You studied her, mud on her hem, stray petal in her braid. Your sister's ghost flickered in the space between you. "What is your name?" you asked. "Elin." You nodded. She bowed, too deep. Then she turned to flee. "Elin," she froze. You reached out and pulled the petal from her hair. "Walk carefully," you said. "These flowers are planted over bones." She nodded, her eyes shining with something like recognition. Then she was gone. You stood among the thorns long after dark, your fingers gripping your wrist as if to keep the past from escaping through your skin. Somewhere in the distance, music played. The king was celebrating, but you were remembering. The next morning a new edict was issued. No reenactments of royal history and public performances. No puppetry. No song. By order of the Queen. No one objected. You smiled again. But now the smile had teeth. You kept the mirror hidden for years, covered it with silk, turned it toward the wall, told your attendants it was cracked, cursed, unnecessary. But mirrors have their own hunger. They wait. And when you can no longer lie to yourself, they speak. It began with the dreams. Alara walking through fire without burning, her skin glowing like embers, her eyes untouched. She would hold out her hand, and you would reach, but always too late. The dream always ended with her whispering your name, the real one, the one you have not heard aloud in years, the one that means flame of the heavens. You started waking with tears on your cheeks. Still, you did not cry, until the day Elin returned, not as a servant, as a messenger. She stood in your council chamber holding a letter from a northern village requesting aid after a landslide. Her face was calm, but her hands trembled. "I saw her," she whispered after the meeting. "In a painting, a woman who looked like me and like you. She was dancing with fire behind her." You froze. She had no name, only the title, the forgotten one. You ordered the gallery sealed, the curator exiled, the painting destroyed, but at night you found yourself sketching her face from memory, over and over, until the charcoal bled into your skin. And that was when you uncovered the mirror. It was smaller than you remembered, dusty, cold. You stared. At first you saw the queen, regal, composed, untouched. Then slowly the lines began to shift. Your mouth turned downward, your eyes darkened, and there, just behind your shoulder, her, Alara. Not as a ghost, but as a question. What did you become to survive? What did you kill to remain? You began to speak her name aloud, first in your chamber, then in prayer, then to the stars, quietly, carefully, like brushing ash off an altar, and the more you spoke it, the more you saw her, in the bend of a servant's neck, in the sound of bare feet on stone, in the quick flicker of a laugh not yet punished. You started visiting the servants' quarters at night, not as a ruler, but as a shadow, listening, watching, learning how your kingdom spoke when it thought you were not listening. It was not what you had hoped. They feared you. They admired your silence, your discipline. But no one remembered her name. That was the final wound. To die was one thing. To be forgotten entirely, that was erasure. You called for the royal historians, asked for records of your sister's trial, her sentence, her life. They found none. She had been scrubbed clean, so you began to rewrite, one page at a time, not in scrolls, but in song, in story, in whispers carried by wind. You commissioned murals under aliases, funded poets through secret channels, carved her name beneath the throne where no one would ever see it, but where your feet would always rest upon it. And then, one day, a child in the garden sang a lullaby you recognized. It was the one Alara used to hum. You smiled, a real one, and for the first time your reflection smiled back. The physicians speak softly now. Their hands linger a little longer on your wrist. They say it without saying it. Your time is thinning, like candle wax in cold air. Your body, once trained into stillness, now trembles without permission. You drop teacups. You forget names. You wake with aches that no longer have origins. Even the crown feels heavier, not with gold, with memory. But the kingdom continues. It always does. The nobles circle like carrion birds, whispering about succession, about loyalty, about legacy. You nod a lot these days. It saves energy. But your mind remains clear, painfully clear. You have written everything, in journals, in hidden compartments, in the margins of law books. Her name, her face, the truth. You have sent secret copies of her story to every temple, every orphan school, every village bard. Some will be ignored, some will be burned, but not all, not this time. You have replaced mirrors across the palace, large ones, clean, uncovered. You want them to see, not themselves, but you, and the parts of you that came from her. One morning, Elin returns, older now, married, with a daughter. She wanted to meet you, Elin says, her voice breaking. The girl steps forward. She is small, curious, unafraid. You kneel, your knees cracking, and take her hand. What is your name, you ask. Alara, she says. The name strikes like thunder, and yet you smile. Do you know where it comes from, you whisper. She shakes her head. You nod slowly. You will. That night, you sit alone in the royal chamber. The king is long gone. The throne belongs now to formality, not to fire. Outside your window a storm gathers, low and growling. You leave the curtains open, let it see you. Your breathing is thin, but your heart is full. You do not fear death, you fear forgetting. But now you will not be forgotten. Not because of your laws, not because of your silence, but because of a song sung by a child who bears her name, and stories passed in kitchens by maids with tired eyes, and mirrors that now reflect more than obedience. You close your eyes, and somewhere, far beyond the palace gates, a new voice begins a tale about two sisters, one who burned and one who watched, and how in the end both of them lived on, not in gold, but in memory, because thrones rust, but stories burn forever, and this was never the king's kingdom. It was hers. It was yours. It was never about ruling. It was about remembering. And the fire that once silenced you now lights the world.